In the spring of 1898, it took the United States just 3 months to dismantle 400 years of Spanish imperialism in the Americas. This escalation toward war was steered by a deliberate intersection of corporate strategy and a competitive media landscape, rather than a direct military provocation. By the 1890s, the Spanish Empire had dwindled to a second-rate power. Having lost its major colonies in Mexico and Peru, Madrid struggled to maintain its remaining grip on the Caribbean and the Philippines. The decay of this aging European empire created a power vacuum off the American coast, offering a specific geopolitical opening for a rising United States. Spanish authorities responded to local insurrections with systemic brutality. They burned the crops of suspected rebels and forcibly resettled entire village populations into monitored camps to prevent them from aiding the resistance. Colonial administrators utilized mass executions to maintain order, famously killing the nationalist writer José Rizal during the Philippine Revolution. Despite chronic weapon shortages and the execution of their leaders, the Cuban rebels secured broad support for their struggle against Spanish rule. These events threatened a massive financial stake. American investors had over $35 million tied up in the island's agricultural infrastructure. This chart highlights the economic dependency between the two nations. It shows that 90% of all Cuban exports flowed directly into the United States. As plantation workers joined the rebellion and fields were destroyed in the fighting, the unrest began to deal direct damage to American corporate profits. While the American public viewed the conflict through a humanitarian lens, the government in Washington faced a mounting pressure to stabilize these multi-million-dollar endowments. Two media moguls realized they could weaponize this tension to win a fierce circulation war. The first was William Randolph Hearst, publisher of the New York Journal. His primary competitor was Joseph Pulitzer of the New York World, who was equally aggressive in the fight for the public's attention. Their strategy became known as yellow journalism, the practice of using scandalous, sensationalized, and often entirely invented stories to drive newspaper sales. The press corps flooded American doorsteps with exaggerated tales of Spanish cruelty, successfully whipping the reading public into a moral frenzy. This media machine turned international tragedy into a profitable headline, proving that a nation could be incentivized toward war through a relentless news cycle. President William McKinley initially resisted calls for intervention. He maintained that American businessmen had entered Cuba at their own risk and were responsible for their own losses. By early 1898, Spain attempted to avert conflict by offering an armistice and political rights to Cubans, but the rebels, now sensing a path to total independence, rejected the offer. As riots broke out in Havana, McKinley deployed the battleship USS Maine. He framed the arrival as a mark of friendship, though the ship served as a heavily armed safeguard for American interests in the city. On the evening of February 15th, a massive explosion tore the ship apart, sending a pillar of fire 150 feet above the harbor. Over 260 sailors were killed. Modern analysis of the ship's debris suggests the blast was an accident caused by a fire in the coal bunker that ignited the nearby ammunition storage. Regardless of the evidence, the Yellow Press immediately blamed Spain. This front page from the World presented the explosion as a deliberate attack by a bomb or torpedo. The ship's captain urged the public to withhold deterrent until a report was finished, but the newspapers relegated his caution to small, easily ignored print. Hearst offered a $50,000 reward for the conviction of the criminals, successfully turning a likely internal accident into an unavoidable mandate for military action. The national mood quickly eclipsed McKinley's restraint. The public united around a single slogan, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." Members of the president's own party began to label him a coward, claiming that his refusal to fight was a betrayal of American honor. Under immense domestic pressure, Washington issued a final ultimatum, giving Spain 3 days to withdraw its forces from Cuba and recognize the island's independence. International efforts by European diplomats to pull both sides back from the brink failed, as the deadline passed without a Spanish withdrawal. When a leader's political survival becomes dependent on military escalation, diplomacy reaches its limit. The United States formally declared war on April 25th, immediately calling for 125,000 volunteers to join the front lines. The conflict moved with surprising speed. Within a few months, the Spanish Navy was defeated, and the centuries-old colonial government in Cuba had evaporated. The 1898 conflict replaced a crumbling Spanish presence with a new American willingness to intervene abroad. It demonstrated that corporate ledgers and newspaper circulation could drive military mobilization just as effectively as the threat of invasion.